Word of the day, memento. Memento is a synonym, right? Synonym of souvenir. It refers to something that is kept as a reminder of a person, place, or thing. Like most of y'all thinking the Bills are going to be great over the past 5 years. And they ain't been. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? If you don't win Super Bowl, you're not great. So I've been right every single time. Welcome back to Chopping It Up with P. Scott. I'm Prescott Kelly. It is a dreary Sunday morning in Alaska. But that makes it great because it's football season, guys. It's sweater weather. It's soup season. It's chili season. It's football season. Welcome back to fall, y'all. On today's episode, we're going to recap P. Scott's picks. That was a late night live stream from Friday night because I had already one leg of my 5-game parlay was the Eagles and Packers, which we hit on. So stay tuned because we'll recap that. If you guys got any fantasy dilemmas, I got a fantasy dilemma. I wasn't sure about Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek Hill got detained this morning, and I don't have him on my fantasy team, but I have him in one of my DraftKings lineups. But so far, it sounds like he's going to play. So you got Tyreek Hill. I would play that man. Play that man. Because he's going to go off. And if you have to restructure another DraftKings lineup that you have to put him in there, you better do that too. So welcome back to Chopping with P. Scott. I'm Prescott Kelly. What we'll do first, because there are some NFL games that I didn't go into for P. Scott's picks, but ones that I still feel fairly strong about. We're going to hold myself accountable. So every week we're going to come back and revisit what I did, what I put my own money on. I'm not telling y'all to do it, but I feel pretty strong. Usually I'm about a 65, 70% on my hits, but I always do parlays. So if they don't fully hit, basically you're zero, right? But to get back into things before we actually get into the new content, any of your comments or questions, the recap of P. Scott's picks from Friday was Eagles -2. Now, again, these were locked in at a certain time on Friday. These lines may have moved, so keep that in mind. And that if that sways the way that you would wager these games, I totally understand it. But this is where I was around 11 o'clock Alaska time Friday morning. So we had Eagles -2. That one hit. Seahawks -6 versus Broncos. Quick recap. I know Bo Nix has played in a lot of big games and a lot of big stadiums, but you're not playing against college kids anymore. I think that Seattle won because the noise environment isn't really what I'm worried about, even though Seattle is renowned for what kind of environment it is. It could be one of the loudest ones in NFL, like currently. But -6 to me with all the weapons with DK and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Um, Walker's out there. I don't think that Geno Smith is as good as some people build him up to be, especially from a couple of years ago. But I would say that given a rookie quarterback on the road, Seattle, tough environment, I would say -6 is a lot to eat, but Seattle -6 on that front. Rams 4.5 plus 4.5 at the Lions. I do. I feel like the Lions are extremely overrated. They went from one of the most doo-doo butter franchises that we've ever seen, and in such a short period of time. Yes, they've been able to turn around, and they've got to an NFC Championship game last year. That's good for them, but I don't have the same faith in Jared Goff to consistently do it, especially because I feel like the two depend on Amon St. Brown and Laporta. I see that one being somewhat of a fail, falling flat. I got the Rams +4. Again, doesn't mean that the Rams are going to win straight up, but if you're giving me 4.5, I'll go ahead and take that. Moving on to the next one, Niners -4.5 at Jets. Again, that line may have moved, but Niners -4.5 to me is a strong bet. The Jets for me, I have no idea what I'm going to get from Aaron Rodgers right now. Not playing the preseason, like I have this back and forth theory, not really a theory, but when these veteran dudes have been in the league forever, which Aaron Rodgers has, usually training camp doesn't mean anything, but his circumstance is completely different just because one, it's the Jets. He only played 4 snaps last year. You'd think that he'd want to at least get some reps under his belt, right? So I don't know what version of Aaron Rodgers I'm going to get. I still know that Christian McCaffrey is awesome. Brandon Ayuk is awesome. Debo Samuel's awesome. I still don't feel like I feel like Debo is one of the more overrated wide receivers in football, but not overrated as a football player. And you got to make the distinction between the two. But -4.5, I feel like the Jets are going to get mollywopped. There's not going to be any Hassan Reddick. That offensive line is not great. The only way that I think that the Jets can cover this game, I still don't think that they can win, but I feel like the Jets can cover is if they run Brees Hall into the ground, because every once in a while, that Niners defense can be really susceptible to the run. Sometimes I feel like it's designed for that specific reason, is because since now it's a passing league, you'd almost rather just give up the 3, 4, 5 yards at a chunk and not give up the big play. But the Niners 4.5, and they're at home against the Jets. To me, I feel like that's easy money. In the last one of P. Scott's picks, this is the fifth game of the 5-game parlay, because again, we already hit on the Eagles -2, is Chargers -3 versus the Raiders. We mentioned this on the previous episode. I have no idea which version of Gardner Minshew I'm going to get, because he's like the one gunslinger that I feel like we truly have in the NFL. Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't here anymore. Like, he's not coming out that locker room, guys. So I don't really know what I'm going to get, but I do feel that under the Harbaugh regime now, they're going to set a tone, which I hate. I hate doing coach speak on this show, because I try to find the funnier in this space that most take too serious. You have to forgive me though. It is 8 o'clock in the morning. I've been up since 6, but I didn't want to wake anybody else up, so I'm not quite my usual perky self. But with Harbaugh coming into town, I think they're going to try to be not quite so cute, not quite so fancy, and this thing could get ugly. I know there's no Austin Eckler anymore. I know there's no Keenan Allen anymore. I understand all of that. But I think he's going to want to muck it up. -3 to me. I feel like I'm taking that all day long. So to recap, the 5 parlay, and so obviously if you didn't listen to the previous show, this is a plus 1,200 odds. So if you bet $100, it was gonna net you 1,200. And that was Eagles -2, Seahawks -6, Rams +4.5, Niners -4.5, and Chargers -3. So Jay Hall, Jay, thanks for joining in this morning, my man. I know it's probably noon for you. It's early for your boy over here. He's got Taysom Hill or Noah Fant for tight end. The only thing I struggle with when it comes to with Taysom Hill is I think it depends on what kind of league you're in, because if you're talking DraftKings, what I believe is Taysom Hill doesn't get credit for passing yards anymore, because that's what people were doing. They were playing him as the flex because he was playing quarterback, and they kind of nixed that cheat code. So I guess it kind of depends on one, if that's even still a thing anymore, but two, if it's not. Noah Fant, I honestly kind of think it's a toss up, because Taysom Hill is one of those dudes who if he's not getting any credit for the passing yards in your league, then I would say if he's not getting credit for the passing yards, then I would probably go Noah Fant. If he does, then I would say Taysom Hill. Patriots on a 7.5-point spread. That was one of the things. So I've been really watching the line on. There's 2 games. So I try not to bet Buffalo if I don't have to. I don't like betting with my heart, because I'm betting with my money. So I usually stay away from betting on my favorite team. But the Bills are +6.5. I feel like it's a trap game. Not to lose necessarily, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is an absolute stud. I think he's going to get fed. The Bills secondary has been decimated just because of injuries. Dudes just leaving. That secondary is not the same that it was even a year and a half ago. It's completely different, except for Kaiir Elam, who I don't trust at this point. Cole Bishop seems like a good dude. Seems like he's going to be able to kind of resurrect the safety position, but he's a youngin as well. He's a rookie. So I could see Arizona giving them problems, but as far as the Patriots spread, I run into the situation where, so the biggest thing for me is I've seen that Jamar Chase has been questionable the entire game. If Jamar Chase plays, I would, and that's the whole reason why I'm holding, I'm not taking that whole Pats game, is since he's been questionable with this contract issue. If he's not playing, I don't know if I trust them to be able to put up. The way I look at it is that Patriots offense to me, I think is going to be so bad where if they don't get to 14 points, and I don't know if they can, but the Bengals defense has something to prove as well. They've been kind of shoddy over the last half a year or so. If Chase is playing, then I would absolutely take the Bengals -7.5. If he's not, I'm staying clear. Joe Burrow has struggled early in the regular season. Some of it's because of injuries, some of it's just because that some teams just get out to slow starts. That's what happens, and then they build going forward. But hmm, that's a tough one. So I'm trying to stay here, try to be engaged and also look in the chat. So Chase is playing. So Chase is playing, but T. Higgins isn't. You know what? With that info, because I thought that T. Higgins was, but Jamar wasn't going to. I still don't know if I like that enough because I do like Christian Gonzalez. That dude's a stud. I think that Mayo has something to prove, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's going to try to overcompensate and just be too much like Bill Belichick on this first run, where he's trying to be very defensive centric. Jamar Chase, not that he's not one of the better wide receivers in the NFL because he absolutely is, but like you don't have Joe Mixon anymore. There's no T. Higgins. I don't know, man. Like I that one's tough for me. I'd still stay away from that. That Bengals pass game doesn't make me feel good because I don't think that the Patriots are going to be able to put up enough points. But if it's just Jamar in all reality, who's their real number one threat, I feel like they'll be able to bracket him enough where Joe's not going to be able to put up 24 on them, you know? So I would still probably stay away from that one entirely, but I went back and forth on that one a lot. It was all about matchups for me. We still have gunslingers Stafford and Allen and Dak and Herbert. I don't really consider Dak. So I'd say we're kind of out of the gunslinger mentality. I don't consider those Stafford. If you really want to, fine, you can label him that. Allen, sure, I'll give you that. But we're that you're handpicking with that one. Herbert, I don't consider a gunslinger. Dak, I absolutely do not consider a gunslinger. I'm talking about dudes who are willing to throw 20 interceptions to score 35 to 40 touchdowns. That you're willing to do that, which kind of brought me up to something that I had this anecdotally in my notes, but since we're here, I'll go ahead and bring it to fruition. The NFL has kind of adopted this mentality of what the NBA and Major League Baseball is now. But the problem is nobody really watches baseball. Baseball gets absolutely crucified for home run versus strikeout, right? The NBA gets crucified for the 3-point shot versus taking the mid range. But what's more valuable? The automatic run on the home run or the three, just because of its value. It's 50% more. What we're seeing now is the NFL has evolved, the play calling has evolved, the rules have evolved, but the NFL doesn't really catch as much heat for them wanting to go to this mode of all or nothing. Give me 7 or give me death, right? They're not looking for, we're not trying to score field goals. We're not trying to get 3. We're trying to get 7 on possessions, which has always been weird to me because football's always been the sport that we've said, well, it's a game of inches. You're scared of that inch though, right? It's supposed to represent toughness. It's supposed to represent we're not scared of whoever's on the other side. But 4th and 1, my God, nope. We got a punt. And it's always been weird to me that in a sport that has glorified gladiators, that has put us in this from the fans' perspective of these are the toughest dudes on planet Earth to play sports. And, hockey will always have their things and MMA fighters have that. But as far as a sport that really means something in America, that y'all worried about 4th and 1.5, and now all of a sudden y'all change your tone. but the NFL really hasn't gotten any backlash for it. The only thing that they've gotten real backlash for is bring back real football, but y'all still watch. Y'all say they even watching because it's softer now and because you can't blindside hit nobody anymore. You're still watching though. And that's why to me that the NFL really hasn't gotten as much smoke for this going in on fourth and short or going for it even on the other side of the 50, but you're on their 45. The analytics have told you, what would you rather do? Kick a 62, 63-yard field goal, miss, and then give them field position on your side of the ball, or punt it and only net 20, 25 yards? Why don't you just go for it and leave it in the middle, right? So the NFL has adopted some of these rules, or not really rules, but thought process, like the NBA 3 versus 2 and MLB home run versus strikeout, but they're not really catching the same heat. I had that in my notes today, and I'm actually really glad that somebody brought it up because I wanted to bring it up, but didn't at the same time. And Jay said, I will never go for it on 4th and 1. The thing for me is like, when it's Madden, yeah, I'm never going for it on 4th and 1, ever. So let's go ahead and move on to fantasy. If y'all have any other fantasy dilemmas, because I had some fantasy dilemmas as well. Yeah, moving on to fantasy. So I got laughed at in both of my leagues. So I have one for this particular show, right? The Chap on Peascott Page podcast. I've got a fantasy football league there, and I have one that is just for podcasters, right? So in both leagues, I took Saquon Barkley very high, and spoiler alert, that boy went off. And I figured as much. Like, if you can look at it from the perspective of actual football, which I try to. When you try to compartmentalize actual football versus fantasy football, I could see where you'd be like, well, why would you take him? Because the offensive line isn't going to be as good, blah, 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 blah. But there's too many weapons in Philadelphia where things aren't going to open up for huge run lanes for him, opening things out of the backfield. So I took Saquon very, very high for all those reasons. And week 1 dividends paid off. The one thing for me, and I'll wait for you guys to go ahead and put any of your fantasy week 1 dilemmas, because the games will knock up in about 40 minutes. So if you have any questions, if you're on the fence about something, let me know. I know for me personally, I've been struggling this one because I wouldn't be a real one if I didn't back up what I've been saying for years. So for the last 3 years now, I've been caping up for Jerry Jeudy. And I said he just needs a quarterback, or he just needs somebody competent to get him the football. And then when they got Russell Wilson last year, I thought this will be it. This will be the year that he proves himself. That didn't really happen. He's also had some injuries. And I have been trying to ride this Jerry Jeudy train for the last 3 years. And I don't know if it's a combination of I want Deshaun Watson to be good again, because I remember seeing him in Houston and thinking that dude is going to be awesome forever. And then everything kind of fell apart with his off the field stuff, where I backtracked and I was like, no, I'm done with this kid. But also, I still want him to be able to resurrect his career, right? I have very little faith in that at this point in time. Even though they're not the same, right? The issues aren't the same, but I'm almost kind of putting him in the same box as like Ben Simmons, of a dude who I think that the talent was always there, but they short circuited with one off the field issue with them, and were just never able to get it back. I want Deshaun to be able to get it back, because again, I've been high on Jerry Jeudy for years. And what I'm putting all these things together is O-line, Nick Chubb. Now, Chubb's going to be out for the first 4 weeks, so maybe it's not a strong play. And I'm not starting him this week anyway, as far as Jerry Jeudy is concerned. I'm not starting him until at least Chubb is back, because I do feel like that adds something, right? You start getting a box loaded, opening up things for other wide receivers. But it's coupled with, I want Deshaun to be able to get back on track. Him, Cooper, Jeudy, Chubb, all together, I think can make something for a good run for Cleveland. But that's the dude for me who I picked up in both leagues. And I I struggle with it, but it's almost one of those like those long-term plays. Like I don't remember who the tight end is for the Vikings right now. I know it's Hawkinson, but the guy before, like the guy after him. Um they have something like I'll pick Hawkinson late in my draft because I know that once he's back, he's going to be a stud. And some people drafted this backup early, which I don't think makes a whole lot of sense, especially because JJ is going to get so many targets. Um, so Jay says that Watson is completely done, and he might be. He might just be cooked. Um, I'd like to think that there's still a career there to be salvaged. Um, Nevin Bradfield. Hey, Evan Bradfield's one of the dudes in the podcast fantasy football league that I'm in. I appreciate you guys bringing me into your guys' circle. He says, "You think Deshaun Watson can get back to that after 4 years? Back to like the Jordan stage of his career? No, I don't think he'll ever be that again. Deshaun Watson, like his second and third years in the league, I thought was destined to be what we consider a top five quarterback. And he was always going to be in that conversation. Whether he won a Super Bowl or not didn't really matter. Whether he won MVP or not to me didn't really matter. But I feel like he was on that trajectory where he was consistently going to be in the conversation every year. So if you ask if I feel like he has the opportunity to get back to being that dude after 4 years, I don't. I don't know if he'll ever get back to that status. But when they restructured his contract, and I think that that's important to also talk about him and the Buccaneers as well, because you've got two guys now with the way the NFL contracts are going from the quarterback perspective. Now you're going to be getting both of those guys at value, especially Tampa Bay, because they signed him to Baker to a 3-year, $100 million deal. I think he's got 2 years left on it. If I remember right, it's this year and next year. But yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get back to what we consider the Jordan-esque years of Deshaun Watson again. No, I don't. But if they can get a competent version of that dude who can still make plays, break outside the pocket, extend plays and they break down, because he still has the athletic ability. He's going to lose that in the next 3 to 5 years, I would imagine. But as far as right now, the electric ability of him, I think is still there. I believe that it's more of just the block of, does this team even want me? And I think that Cleveland's gotten to a point now, because obviously the vitriol and the hate was really strong when he got to Cleveland. It was weird because it's almost like everything else in life. There's some people who say, hey, we're getting a top 5 to 10 quarterback. Doesn't matter about what he did or what he said, or if he showed any contrition, we got to do now. And there's some who say, I don't care. As long as he's here in Cleveland, I will never support him and I'll never support the franchise, even though you will. But I feel like as long as you can get a competent version to Deshaun Watson, Cleveland will still be relevant. That division is obviously bonkers, but we've seen this time and time again where the Steelers are always good. And now we're going off in a tangent, and I'm fine with that for now. That the Steelers are always going to be good because Tomlin just makes them defensively. They're always going to be relevant, and they can always seem to overcome this quarterback incompetence. I feel like that's going to be short-lived, though. I feel like that timetable of them just being able to be in our spotlight, that, well, it's the Steelers. Of course, they'll be good. I think that time is about to change. They have been able to get the quarterback position right in multiple times over the past 3 to 5 years. They held on to Roethlisberger too long. The defense has been carrying that franchise basically since its existence, right? But the NFL has changed. The Steelers largely haven't, which there's some good and bad in that, right? They've had, 3 coaches in infinity billion years? Yeah, you won a lot of Super Bowls, but you've also been one of those teams that has consistently been good, had a 500 record since Tomlin's been there, but falls short really every year. Like their playoff record is atrocious, but again, they get the pass because it's Steeler Nation. They get the pass because, well, they don't have the front office and coaching turnover. And I feel like you can go both ways of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that was my argument 2 years ago when we started to get some of this uprising of Tomlin being fired. And my argument's always, It's always going to be, what is the plan? Do you have a plan? Is there somebody that you know that you can get better? If there's no plan in place, there's not really a reason to blow it up because the coach, if it's personnel, coaching, like, it has to be everything continuously, right? It can't just be one thing or another. You blow it up if you're like, yo, we are so far away, we have no chance. But we've seen teams with trash rosters be legitimately good, and it's because of coaching. So at that point in time, if your coach isn't your talent evaluator, and he's not your scout, and he's not the one making the personnel decisions, don't get rid of the coach. Find somebody who's better at that job. So going back and forth on this, I do think that at some point in time, the rope is going to get shorter and shorter for Tomlin the longer this goes on, because we don't even consider them, when you talk about the AFC North just as a division, we don't even talk about them as one of the best in their division. That's a 4-team sample size. When you do word association with the AFC and what's the pecking order, you got to go halfway down the conference. And then when you think about the other conference, you're basically saying that they're essentially a bottom third team and you're overachieving every year. Let's get back to the chat real quick. Can they go back to Wilson if Fields plays well today? Is what Evan Bradley says. Let's see. Can they take back? I think, that's a really good question. Can the Steelers go back to Wilson if Fields plays well today? I think they can. This is always the weird thing to me when it comes to like franchise altering moves is 1 week does not make your career, which obviously we know, but like we already have our thoughts on Justin Fields. We've made our bed and our perception of what Justin Fields is. He's an athlete, not a quarterback. We've made our minds up on Russell. He's old, he's washed, can't throw the deep ball, can't do the let Russ cook thing anymore. So they really don't have any obligation to either one of these guys, mostly because they're not paying Justin Fields that much, and Denver's fronting the bill for Russ. This is a year for me where, and to kind of piggyback to my original Tomlin take, is this might be his best year, and the best way for him to keep his job is because his ideology is going to be, well, what did you want me to do with Justin Fields, who nobody wanted, and an old Russell Wilson? What did you want me to do, dog? So in theory, you could probably tank because the defense is still going to be good. They're going to get a year older, but they're still going to be good. And you still have Pickens, who, to me, if I was him, I would want out of there immediately, because I think that George Pickens is one of those dudes where circumstantially, if he's in the right place, that dude would be a monster. But you're in a position almost similar, I would say, with Miami a couple years ago when you had Tua and you had Ryan Fitzpatrick, aging veteran who was a journeyman, and Russ wasn't a journeyman. He wasn't a journeyman until the last 2 or 3 years. But you had a guy who was, and even still, when I say out loud they were fan favorites, Russ was a fan favorite in Seattle when they were winning, and then the moment that they weren't, he was casted away, right? Whereas Fitzpatrick was always one of those guys where like, yeah, we can't win with him, but at least he's fun, dude, right? Like at least he's fun to watch, and he's fun in post-game interviews. But that's to me the almost kind of the dynamic is we got the young quarterback, Tua and Justin Fields. Ownership didn't really want either one of those dudes. And we have the old KG vet, Fitzpatrick and Russell Wilson. If you had a real quarterback controversy, then I would say no. You're going to catch backlash from Steeler Nation, the national media, which they're going to get anyways, even if they do go back to Russ. But for me, the plan was Russ was supposed to start week 1 anyways, right? So if the plan was Russ is going to be our starter week 1, but he's dealing with an injury, at least then, when you take the podium, if you're Tomlin, you have the ability to say, look, Russell's going to be our week 1 starter. We just need to give him another week of rest. If you backtrack to Russ after week 1, to me, that makes sense. You can still do it without having too much vitriol within the locker room, outside the locker room, or any other space. Now, if he plays poorly, then it's even easier, right? That's the easy cop out. If Justin Fields plays like straight cheeks, hey man, we only played him. That's the narrative. We only played him because Russ was hurt. We just needed to have a QB1. We were not going to be the Niners from NFC Championship game a couple years ago. We had a dude in the back pocket, and that's the only reason why he played. If he plays well, though, you can still make the argument, hey, we still want to get Justin because he's young and new to our offense, and we want to get him acclimated. We appreciate the fact that he stepped in and played well week one, but Russ is still he's still our QB1. We're going to go back to it. The thing is, like, whichever lane you want to occupy as far as the story is concerned, you can do it and feel good about it if you're Pittsburgh, right? So you have a back out plan regardless. Isn't that QB, that 2 QB system that we've seen prior in similar circumstances, but not the exact same? You've got a cop out regardless either way. So, were there any games that you guys had as far as either point spreads that you were concerned about, games that you wanted insight on, or your fantasy teams that you're kind of like, we might be in some dire straits? I will filibuster for a moment. I'll go back to Bovada because I had some games that I was really intrigued on. We kind of touched on Buffalo and Arizona earlier. I'd still stay away from there because then Marvin Harrison Jr. could absolutely cook that Bills secondary. I still think that Buffalo will win. Let's just do that. We're going to get into, we'll just run through every game. This isn't P. Scott's picks. We already did that. But if you have other questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We've got about 15 minutes before I'm going to hang it up. But what I will do in the meantime is give you guys what I'm looking at through every single game of the NFL slate. Cardinals at Bills, we've kind of already went over this. I largely would stay away from it. If we're just doing against the point spread, the Bills are -6.5. I don't feel great about it because I do feel like Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to cook. That run defense is going to be great, so James Conner might be able to eat. But at the end of the day, it's the Bills at home, week one. -6.5 is a lot to swallow, especially because I don't trust the defense really at all, especially the back end of it with Milano being out and Kyer Elam being their second corner. Not feeling great about it. But again, still the Bills at home. Bills -6.5. I would go and take. Panthers at Saints. Jesus, because this might be the worst game. No, we still got Vikings and Giants to get to. Panthers at Saints. Panthers are +3.5. I'd actually take Carolina win straight up. I don't trust anything about New Orleans. Not that Carolina gives me anything better, but the only thing is I don't feel like Bryce Young can be any worse than what he was last year, and having another year of professional football under his belt, I think he's going to be able to make some plays. I don't know if taking them on the money line is going to be a tough one for me to stretch on, but I would say Carolina +3.5. Houston at Indianapolis. Nick of the Houston Sports Stadium podcast. Excuse me, if you're still with me. I listened to a little bit of your show the other day, and you're like, we got to stop Jonathan Taylor. If the Texans can stop Jonathan Taylor, the problem is, are you going to be able to? I don't know, man. I know that everyone's high on Houston from the offensive side of the ball, especially. I would be leery of putting too many eggs in one basket on CJ Stroud after year one. But the offensive talent there is bonkers. Defensively, I love Stingley. I like Will Anderson. DeMeco Ryans obviously as a defensive head coming over and kind of changing. I don't like doing this because the coach speak thing is just kind of, I feel like you don't need to hear from me. And I also think that it's largely overrated as far as what we talk about. But I could, if y'all don't him up Jonathan Taylor, because Anthony Richardson is going to be back elusive. I could see him being really involved in their run game, which might make that run pass option a little bit more effective, which means Jonathan Taylor might have more room to run through y'all. But -3 on the road. I'll still take Houston. I don't like this game at all. Let's go ahead and go back to the chat because we had Evan chop back in. I was going to ask about the Panthers. What do you make of them? This is a year for Chuba Hubbard. Does Johnson make a difference? Um, I'm excited for Chuba Hubbard actually because I'm not so much into the fantasy football as far as leagues are concerned anymore. I used to be real heavy, right? I used to do 7 or 8 of these things a year. Then I started getting more into prize picks and um, DraftKings and things of that nature because I was making like legitimate money there. So Chuba Hubbard to me, I actually have him in one of my. I have 5 or 6 DraftKings lineups today. I've got him in one of them. I don't trust. I know that Cam Jordan's awesome, but I feel like you can. He's a dude you can use out of the backfield. He's going to get a lot more touches. I think that he's going to be a really solid player. Like if you've got him in your fantasy lineup, he's a name that's going to be under the radar because as far as like running backs are concerned, even though running backs don't matter what we consider contractually and circumstantially in the NFL, fantasy, they still have a crazy value, right? So if you were lucky enough to pick up Chuba, I do think that he's going to give you, he's going to make you question your running back position more than you think. Obviously, depending if you went RB top heavy, which I did. I went top heavy. One of my leagues, I have ETN, Barkley, ETN, Barkley, and Derrick Henry, right? So I went really crazy top heavy because I got 3 flexes or with my flex, I can use 3 running backs if I want to. But if I had Hubbard, he's going to make me question. I have 3 dudes who I know are going to be my rotation, whether they're my flex or not. But from a fantasy standpoint, Chuba's going to make you question, should I put in my RB2 and open up my flex? Should I keep my flex because I'm heavy on my RB2? Every circumstance is different. But he is going to make you at least question, damn, do I take out Derrick Henry this week? Do I take out Jonathan Taylor this week? Do I take out James Cook this week? I think his production inside, like actually running between the tackles and out of the backfield, especially because we don't have a great sample size of what Carolina's offensive weapons can do, especially from like the wide receiver position. We thought that Adam Thielen was done, and he had a great year last year. He did. Statistically, Adam Thielen had a great year, but otherwise they were pretty lackluster. So, yeah, I think that Chuba Hubbard is going to be a good pickup if you don't have him already. If he's available, I would imagine that somebody would have scooped him up in a deep fantasy league. But if you're like an 8 to 10 teamer and he's still somewhat wasn't picked up, I'd pick him up off waiver wires. It may not be a strong week 1 representation because it is still week 1. Anything can happen, but I do like him more. I like him more than other people do. If we don't have anything else, kickoff starts in about 25 minutes. So I will say this, but we talked about this a little bit earlier, but for those that are watching now, Tyreek Hill, if you have him in your lineup, I know he was detained earlier today. I would hammer that dude. If you don't have him on your actual fantasy team, I would hammer him in daily fantasy. This seems like a day where this dude just wants to go off for 8-9 catches, $160 and 2 tuds. I would smash. He is going to have one hell of a game. Now, the other sleeper pick that I'll give, if you're doing daily, is Jonnu Smith. Because I do think because Miami to me, there's a lot of speed. There's a lot of speed on both sides of the ball with this Jacksonville and Miami game, offensively and defense, offensively respectively for Miami, defensively for Jacksonville. You could, and this is what you might want to do if you're a daily fantasy person, is don't stack Tua because you're going to need a lot of your cap opened up to get Tyreek Hill, to get Jalen Waddle, maybe A-Chain. But Jonnu Smith is a dude I'd watch out for because with those 2 dudes on the outside, going up over the top, running these really deep routes, he's going to be able to kind of sit underneath because, you don't know if A-Chain is going to be sliding out in the flats. Jonnu Smith is going to be a really cheap pickup who I really, really like this week, either for a flex or if you're having questions about your tight end, but again, like I'm really strong into the DraftKings right now. Sneaky low budget pick at the tight end position would be Jonnu Smith. I don't know why I'm helping people that are in my own fantasy league, but I'm a river to my people at this point in time. So to everybody who was able to join us today on Chopping Up with P. Scott, we're going to go ahead and hang in it for the day. Happy NFL Sunday. Evan, thank you so much for dropping in as well. I'd love to have you on my show and or vice versa. And we'll go ahead. You said you didn't hear anything. You didn't hear. I hope that if I had my mic muted the entire time, I'm going to be really upset. I just tried muting it and unmuting it and everything went well. But I don't have to re-listen because that is alarming to me. But you guys know the drill. Stay up, stay blessed, enjoy your football Sunday. And we'll catch you on Tuesday. Oh, I didn't hear anything. Okay. So now Evan's like, I didn't hear anything because he's in the league. All right. I was gonna say, man, if that's a technical difficulty on my part, that's embarrassing as hell. And I got some audio to fix. All right. Well, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy Sunday. I got sidetracked. So James Bush is going to be on the show Tuesday, 6 p.m. Alaska time. So that's 9 p.m. Central. And we're going to talk Jacksonville Jaguars football because he's a Jags fan. And I've been trying to have a correspondent for every NFL team throughout the season, kind of represent. I was trying to do before the season, but now that we're in season, doesn't matter. I'm scratching it. We're just going to, to quote, I forget who said it, but we'll do it live. And he'll be on with us live on Tuesday, 9 p.m. Central to talk Jags football. Stay up, stay blessed. And we will catch you guys on the next one.